rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. Well, we had a, I'm going to say, monumental decision come down from SCOTUS today. And it is, if everything goes according to where I think it's going to go, it's going to spark a flurry of redistricting across the country. We'll get into that in just a minute. Plus, I'm going to start off with a Greg Gutfeld takedown of the D.C. shooter and his motivations and how much the Democrat Party is to blame. But first, we have, for tonight, on deck, a fan favorite for the Pledge of Allegiance. It is none other than Coco, Cam, and Sean. They are over in the green room getting themselves ready. Sean is all excited. I can see him there. He's getting all excited about this. So, let's go ahead and get things kicked off. If you are of mind, please stand or remove your hat if you're wearing one like me. Place your hand over your heart and follow along with Coco, Cam, and Sean as they recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, we thank you, Coco, Cam, and Sean, for that wonderful rendition of the Pledge. If you would like to hear your rendition of the Pledge played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself reciting or performing the Pledge in your style. Take that audio file, video file, attach it to an email, and send that email off to me by sending it to fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. And I will, of course, get you into the rotation. If you haven't sent yours in yet, I have 3 more spots that I'm looking for. I have 23, and I want 26 by the end of 2026. So, in order for that to happen, of course, I need you to send them in to me. All you need to do is send them in, record yourself, and then, of course, send it in. Now, if you use your phone to record yourself, you can utilize the share option. That's the S-H-A-R-E option. You can utilize the share option and send it off to fans at AmericanPerspective.online, and I will get you into the rotation as quickly as possible. All righty. Of course, tonight is
down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
That's right. It's Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And for tonight's Whiskey Wednesday, I am drinking out of the 1792 bottle, small batch bottle. 1792, a Kentucky bourbon whiskey. Well, Kentucky bourbon. And it is in the sought-after, but very rare, True Grit Roots Network Red, White, and Blue glass. There it is. With, of course, the requisite stones, because you got to have stones to drink with me. Anyway, first sip. Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, that is some good stuff. All right. And since it is True Grit Roots Network night, along with Whiskey Wednesday, they are the headline sponsor. Head on over to tgrn.net. That's tgrn.net. And that's their home on the web. That's True Grit Roots Network's home on the web. You can listen to one of our two signature channels, whether it's Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio or Walter Trout Blues Rock Radio. And you can listen directly from your browser right here. You can see, you can listen directly. There they are. You just click the little play button and you can listen right in the browser itself. Pick one, pick both. Well, don't listen to both at the same time. Believe me, it's kind of hard to do. But pick one, and then when you want to switch it up, switch over to the other one. There you go. Whatever your mood desires. And even better yet, we would definitely appreciate it if you would go ahead and download our apps. We have an app for each one. One is the Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio app. The other is the Walter Trout Blues Rock Radio app. You can download both of them from the App Store or the Google Play Store. And take us with you on your mobile device. You can take us everywhere. You can gain internet access. You can listen to the Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio or Walter Trout Blues Rock Radio. And again, pick whichever one suits your mood. And to help promote your love of Walter Trout Blues Rock Radio or Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio or even TGRN as a whole, I invite you to go up here to the top menu at tgrn.net and click the shop button. I'm flashing it in red here on the video screen. You can go and click on the shop button and be redirected to shop.tgrn.net, where you will find all our swag. That's right. You can get t-shirts, hoodies, and even caps with the Walter Trout Blues Rock Radio, the Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio, or the TGRN Roots Network logo in various colors and, of course, various sizes. All to show your appreciation for True Grit Roots Network and the two signature channels that we bring to you on a 24/7, 365 basis. Get one of each. Hey, get one for every day of the week, and then you won't have to worry about picking out what you're going to wear other than just figuring out which logo is going to show. There you go. Just grab one for every single day of the week, and you're all set. You can demonstrate your love of True Grit Roots Network and the channels that we are providing, the stations, the digital stations that we are providing for you to listen to all the time. Yep, head on over to shop.tgrn.net for your swag. And don't forget to check out tgrn.net, the webpage itself. We've got all kinds of information about our shows and everything else. You can go and check it out, tgrn.net. That is TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, based out of Austin, Texas. All right. Now it looks like my closed captioning hung up there for a second. It's like, oh, I don't understand what you're saying. Anyway, all right, we're going to start tonight off. I mean, I know a lot of people we've been talking about this White House Correspondents' Dinner shooter, the D.C. shooter, who was a highly educated but obviously not very smart guy. Anyway, Greg Gutfeld had a monologue. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's about a 4 minutes plus monologue. I don't know how far I'll get into it, maybe about half, but he makes a lot of really good points here. And the main one, of course, that he's going to go over is the fact that, well, Democrats need to understand that they are the cause of all of this. You cannot avoid it with the shooter. Yeah, you cannot avoid it with the shooter here. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen to Greg Gutfeld as he takes down the Democrats in tonight's Truth Bomb segment.
Terrorism that you say, well, now we'll never know. What could it possibly be?
Well, they're running away from this story because they know they got their fingerprints all over it. I disagree with Harold. With all due respect, a call for unity is not for us. We don't need it.
He called for it, though.
No. I'm just saying that it's not for me to hear. It's for your side. We don't need it because it's only a one-way thing. You mentioned some examples like the Pelosi thing, which is a mental illness thing. The Wisconsin thing, we still aren't sure what the hell happened there. The Whitmer thing was a plot. Who created the plot? That would take an entire special to go under. I disagree with Jesse. This guy did hear voices. They were Tim Waltz's, they were Ted Lieu's, they were Brandon Johnson's, they were CNN's, they were The View, they were MS Now. Okay. I think this is a helpful assassination attempt because it is the first one to show that you can be radicalized by liberal smugness. If you read his posts and if you read his manifesto, it sounds like every smarmy, sanctimonious, self-satisfied pronouncement from an asshole like Brandon Johnson, like Waltz, like Lieu, the people who think they know better than you. This guy was not a crank. He was not deranged. Don't buy into that narrative because it lets these pompous asses off. He didn't do this because, as Jesse said, he didn't have voices in his head. He was just following orders. He was operating on a filter that said Trump was Hitler, and therefore it would be immoral if you didn't take Hitler out. So his filter is actually making him logical. He's the sanest one in the group because he took them at their word. When MS Now says Trump is Hitler, he's the sensible one. He went out and went after Hitler. Now, if you told him he was wrong, would he listen? No, because you know this guy. You've run into this guy. They think they're right. This is the big point. The biggest problem, and I don't include you in this, Harold, the problem with the left is the lack of humility. This is what has always bothered people on the right. We believe in a higher power. We could be wrong. But for the left, they can have ideas which turn into belief, which turn into an ideology, and there's no breaks to it, i.e. a higher power that might say, you know what? You could be wrong. This is a guy that when you read his stuff, he is right on everything. When you read his posts, when you read his, and then if something disappoints him, it's everybody's fault. This is exactly the same kind of person you run into at BLM, at Antifa, at any protest. Your liberal friend who thinks the world is out to get them, and yet they sit at home and they do nothing and they blame Trump. This event exposes that. It also exposes the myopic egoism of the media, who in the run-up to the dinner said, you know what, it's really about a threat against the press. And who brought on the threat? Well, it's this orange demon, Trump. But it turns out the guy who's getting shot at isn't the press. It's the orange demon that you have turned into a Hitlerian figure. He's the one facing the actual threat when all he's trying to do is what's best for the country. You may disagree with it, but you are the guys that created the rhetoric. So I think that this was a helpful assassination attempt because A, nobody got hurt. I'm not going to go with the conventional thing. Thank God, thank God, thank God. You can't write this off as a deranged person. And that is the lesson. You can learn how rhetoric turns into action, how there are security lapses in a hotel. How the hell was he not shot? Did he just trip? I mean, the Hilton, Paris Hilton is harder to get into than the DC Hilton. and I think the biggest thing here, and it kind of goes back to COVID in a way.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Yeah, I played a very long piece of it, but you get the idea. Anyway, Greg is right. This is probably the first assassination attempt where the person, the individual, yes, he was a bit deranged, But he was deranged in the standpoint that he was following their orders. These leftists who have taken over the Democrat Party, who have taken over the mainstream media, who have taken over the narratives, they are all pushing the exact same thing. Trump is a Nazi. Trump is Hitler. Trump is a rapist. Trump is a pedophile. When they have literally zero physical evidence of any of it. There's nothing. There is nothing at all that is evidenced to any of this. So he bought into all of the propaganda. He bought into everything that Ted Lieu, that Hakeem Jeffries, that Joe Biden, that, Kamala Harris, that Gavin Newsom, Tim Walz. You could name any single one of these individuals, these leftist lunatics on the left, on the Democrat Party, in the Democrat Party, outside of the Democrat Party. I mean, even look at like James Carville. You could talk about any of them. Tucker Carlson. You could talk Candace Owens. You could talk about any of them. And they all, right or left, just the lunatic propagandists that are out there. And this guy, more than likely, had some sort of a post or comment or opinion about any of it. And he decided to act on it. I mean, this is the problem with today's society. This is a problem with the leftist society right now. And of course, they're sitting there and they're like, oh my gosh, well, we can, you guys are the ones. We're not doing it. The right is not doing it. Yes, you have the alt-right like the idiot Nick Fuentes, but he should be immediately turned off as a viable source of reality because he is a complete, utter, stupid moron and because he is espousing crap that nobody should be believing in. But you know what this also proves? This also proves that you can take anybody, give them a platform, and in today's day and age, because of the lack of critical thinking skills, the lack of standards, ethics, morality, intelligence, reason, logic, you'll get those people who, regardless of how high educated they are, I'm sorry, you could sit here and talk about how everybody is so highly educated today. Oh, we're smarter today than what we were 100 years ago. I don't agree. We may be smarter in terms of book smarts, but we're dumber when it comes to everything else that actually provides you with the ability to survive, to perform, to do what must be done, to act in the right and moral stance that our country is founded upon. We've got even more. Here, look, you've got a child, or, you got a child in the Wisconsin school district, and he goes to Kalkuna High School, he or she, and you have a teacher who puts a post out on social media. Yeah, he puts out a post on social media. And he apparently says something along the lines of, well, I'm not impressed with recent presidential assassins. He's like, it's effing embarrassing. And what he's referring to is the fact that he is not impressed at their effectiveness. And he compares things like Booth, a couple other people I can't even pronounce, and Oswald. He's like, those assassins must all be spinning in their graves. And then he says, MAGAA, which stands for Make Americans Great Assassins Again. This is who's teaching children, people. It's morons like this that are teaching our children. And you wonder, when you have essentially indoctrination farms from kindergarten all the way up to the PhD status, who was pushing all of these fake, phony, lying narratives across the board. And you wonder why we have people like this idiot who tries to assassinate the president and the administration. Now, that Wisconsin teacher, by the way, has been suspended, rightfully so, after posting that just absolute horrific comments. That was reported by the Gateway Pundit. So, yeah. Anyway, all right, well, let's move on for just a second, because there's another idiot that's out there, but we'll get to him in just a moment. First, I don't know if anybody is aware, but Friday is a big day for these leftist lunatics. So be prepared for Friday. Friday is known as May Day. Now, most of the time, people think of May Day as, oh, this is just a welcoming of springtime, warmer weather, better weather, so on and so forth. But May Day was co-opted by all of the Marxists that are out there, calling it International Workers' Day. They're commemorating the historic struggles and gains made by workers in the labor movement. Well, the labor movement has been co-opted by the Marxists, by the Communist Party, the unions, essentially Democrats. And they've already apparently printed their signs. They're getting ready to have another, ineffective No Kings protests. Oh, by the way, that No Kings protests that you said no kings. Yeah, all those dumbass Democrats were fawning at the feet of Charles, King of England, because he happened to mention a few things in his speech that, frankly, are really a bunch of bullshit, because his country is falling to the very diversity that he professes to say makes his country greater. Yeah, they're falling to it. They have all kinds of problems, especially with Islamist extremists that they've allowed into their country. But anyway, I digress. So May Day, polluted by Marxist agitation in Europe, and the American counterparts are attempting to normalize it here in the United States. So, be ready, because here we go. I will almost guarantee you there is going to be protests and everything else. The Communist Party, USA, is revved up to rail against capitalism and Orange Man bad. Yep. They are planning on it. So be prepared. Be ready. The teachers' unions, by the way, are setting aside the entire day to reportedly indoctrinate children, because apparently the NEA and the AFT are part of the May Day Strong Coalition, where hundreds of other leftist member groups are promoting this year's focus, which is, surprise, surprise, workers over billionaires. They're also calling for a day of no work, no school, and no shopping. The NEA explains what the day of action entails, meaning May Day, saying, quote, "This May Day will be a day of rallies, marches, teach-ins, labor actions, and refusal of business as usual. Because when those at the top rig the system, collective action is how we set it right." Yeah, I'm telling you, this is total Marxist ideology that you're seeing here. The proletariat rising up against the bourgeoisie. That's what they're doing. And this is the National Education Association, the NEA, the largest labor union in the U.S., claiming 2.8 million members. Now, it by itself has created a May Day 2026 toolkit and a walk-in guide for educators to use as they join workers, quote, join workers, parents, students, and community members to rise up for dignity, justice, and public investment in our lives, not in billionaires' profit margins. Yeah. So, just be prepared. It's coming. Be ready. These idiots are going to be all over the place, I'm telling you. And this is just the start, because keep in mind, the weather's going to turn better. So these morons are going to have much better weather to march around and talk and do all kinds of stuff. Anyway. Well, James Comey is back in court again. I told you yesterday that he was indicted. In this particular case, he was indicted for his 8647 post that he put out. Now, the indictment came down in the Eastern District of North Carolina, and it basically lists one single count for knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life and to inflict bodily harm upon the President of the United States. Ironically, some dickwad, yes, I said it, dickwad, in my Facebook feed, he came in and posted something, and lo and behold, his profile and his avatar picture says what? 8647. Yeah. I took a screenshot of it and I posted it on my feed. And I tagged the FBI and the Secret Service. What the hell? I mean, if that's a threat for James Comey, that asshole should also get investigated. Yeah. So anyway, this is the post, by the way. This is the post that he put in. There it is right there. And now he claims that he just sort of came across this in the sand. Yeah. I doubt it. So anyway. Oh, no, Jarhead. It's not Richard. Not Richard Head. It's not Richard Wad. It is completely Dick on both of them. Anyway. Now, of course, James Comey claims his innocence and says that he's going to fight. He's going to, fight this whole thing, or so on and so forth. He's reportedly supposed to voluntarily surrender himself. He's probably not going to spend a lot of time in jail. He's most likely going to be there at his arraignment, and they're going to let him go and do whatever. So, yeah. Whatever. Honestly, I don't hold a high regard as to whether or not this is really going to carry any weight. Just saying. But, there you go. It's just, I'll be honest with you, it's kind of fun just to watch it. Just to watch this whole thing. So, anyway. All right. Enough about that. Let's go over here and let's talk about financial freedom. So there's this new thing out that Rumble has put together. And you know that if you bank, as we've seen here recently, especially under the Biden administration, the government went and froze or encouraged banks to freeze accounts. Encouraged banks to shut off your cards. Encouraged banks to lock you out of your own money overnight. That MyPillow guy, yeah, he was a target of all of their things. Banks, they don't bother to protect you. They control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with actual ownership. Introducing the Rumble Wallet. You don't just buy digital currency Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can also own Tether Gold, which is real gold, on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verified by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators like me on Rumble, you can tip them directly using the Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer, outside of the banking system, outside of the actual platform itself. There's zero permissions, no middlemen, no cancel button. The wallet itself is entirely yours forever. Go to wallet.rumble.com. That's wallet.rumble.com. Find out all the details and determine whether or not you yourself want to join this revolutionary way to not only tip creators, but also protect your investments. Go to wallet.rumble.com. That's wallet.rumble.com to get all those details. And once you're done, you can either download the Wallet app either from there, or you can download it directly from the Google Play or the App Store. That's wallet.rumble.com. And go and check out the rules and regulations, of course, and see if the Rumble Wallet is right for you. That's wallet.rumble.com. Well, speaking of North Carolina, where Comey got indicted. Apparently, North Carolina found a crap ton of people, dead people, on its voter rolls. So the findings came as the state board began digging into their voter rolls to verify the citizenship status of their registered voters. Now, earlier this month, the North Carolina State Board of Elections submitted over 1.3 million voters. Sorry, let me back that up. 7.3 million voter records to the Federal Systemic Alien Verification for Entitlements, which is the SAVE, isn't that cool, database, as part of an initiative to strengthen the accuracy and integrity of the state's voter registration list. Well, the NCSBE clarified that the identification of the deceased individuals on the stater rolls does not necessarily indicate that illegal votes were actually cast. Goes, while we were expected to find some cases, this is higher than we anticipated, Sam Hayes, the executive director, said in a press release. He continued and says that the benefit of entering into cross-state and federal database checks is that it allows us to uncover issues like this. Our goal is to use every available and legal tool at our disposal to achieve the most accurate voter rolls possible. Now we must roll up our sleeves and begin the hard work to act of verifying that every person registered to vote in North Carolina is actually eligible. Our team, along with state and federal, will do what's necessary to meet this responsibility. Now, see, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about right here. All that the conservatives are asking is, hey, let's start doing some due diligence. Let's start using data. Let's start using the rules and regulations that we can to block out people and ensure the integrity of our elections. We're not asking to de-platform or whatever you want to call it, make somebody who is normally a voter get thrown out of the voter rolls. No, that's not what this is all about. What this is to ensure our elections, to know that our elections are as safe and secure as we possibly can get them, because we have seen and know that they are currently not that way. That's what the whole idea of the SAVE Act is all about, along with all of these other things that we're putting on. Now, this particular discovery came amid the agency's ongoing effort to verify the citizenship status of voters, which the NCSBE voted along party lines earlier this month to do after facing lawsuits from the Trump administration for allegedly failing to maintain an accurate voter list. Federal law requires states to remove from their voter rolls people who are ineligible for reasons such as being deceased. That would be a big one. And North Carolina already has a process of biennial list maintenance to remove ineligible voters from its rolls, according to Dr. Andy Jackson, who is the director of the Civitas Center for Public Integrity at the John Locke Foundation, who indicated that the state removed 500,000 ineligible voters through the program in 2025. However, as Jackson points out, for deceased voters, it can take up to 8 to 10 years for their names to actually be removed. Now, Jackson added, of course, that working with the SAVE database has already helped improve North Carolina's list maintenance system, calling the system crucial. So, yeah, there you go. I mean, again, all of this is just to make sure that our elections are as safe and secure as we possibly can make them. That includes the SAVE Act having voter ID and clarifying that a person is a citizen before they register, rather than just checking a checkbox saying, "Oh I attest to the fact that I am a citizen." That doesn't work. Anyway, speaking of that, the Trump administration has launched a nationwide push to obtain full, safe, statewide voter registration lists and maintenance records, and they just supposedly lost a round in court with Arizona. Apparently, a federal district court judge said that Arizona doesn't have to hand over their rolls. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Anyway. So keeping in mind that election integrity is on every common sense conservative's mind, the Republican National Committee's official election integrity account on X said that the findings in North Carolina is exactly why the Trump administration is trying to force states to clean up their voter rolls. It says, turns out checking state voter rolls against federal records actually helps keep them more accurate. Who knew? So, there you go. All right. Well, I know that elections, the midterm elections, are pretty far out there right now. I mean, we're talking, in November of this year. I know this is just April. We haven't even hit May yet, although we're getting close. However, there is some indication that, well, the midterms might not be as cut and dried and as clear as what the past demonstrates or indicates. What am I talking about? Well, generally speaking, the party that is in power will have trouble in the midterms, in a midterm election, in keeping a hold of at least one or possibly two, both houses of Congress. See, usually, historically speaking, the way this has worked is that if the Republicans held the White House, then you would usually see the Congress, at least part of the Congress, flip over to the Democrats, or they would increase their control. Now, this doesn't always happen. I mean, there have been times where you've had a Democrat president and a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate. You also have had times where it's been all Republican. We're almost in that right now, with the exception of the fact that the margins right now in the House and the Senate are so razor thin. And this is part of the reason why everybody is sitting here saying, hey, you know what? It's almost a shoo-in. We've got a blue wave coming. And up until now in this poll I'm about to show you, that has been fairly true. It's been fairly true because polls that they've been taking have indicated that, well, the Democrats might very well take the House. They may, or they have an opportunity to potentially flip the Senate as well. At least that's what the mainstream media wants you to know. Until now. And keep in mind, I'm of one. Don't put a whole heck of a lot of stock in this poll. I'm just saying, only because of the fact that we're still a ways out, and polling obviously have been wrong. I mean, 97% of the country supposedly was behind Hillary, and we all know what happened there. So anyway, this happens to be a poll by Harvard and Harris. These are not right-wing organizations, folks. These are left-wingers. And, well, they did this poll. Apparently, the race for Congress itself is a dead heat as of today. So the question was asked of over 2,000 likely voters. If the congressional election were held today, would you be more likely to vote for a Democrat or a Republican for Congress? Now, notice how they didn't break this apart. They didn't break this into the House of Representatives or the Senate. Most people really aren't 100% clear about the true division between the two, so on and so forth. But anyway, I digress. The result, for those of you who are on the audio portion of the program, the result actually broke down to a literal 50-50 split. Now, obviously, if you're a Democrat, you've said that you would vote for a Democrat. And if you're a Republican, you would obviously say that you would vote for a Republican. Those two were almost even Steven. 97% of the Dems said they would vote for a Democrat, where 4% said that they would vote for a Republican. 3% of Republicans said that they would vote for a Democrat, whereas 96% said they would vote for a Republican. So the party division obviously is ever present, and even more so today than what it has been in the past. That being said, anyone who has identified themselves as an independent or other category, not meaning not Democrat or not Republican, this is where the differential really comes into play. So under the independent other column, 52% said that they would vote for a Democrat, while 48% said that they would vote for a Republican. And this is where the likely midterm voter ends up in a 50-50 split. Now, folks, this is the doomsdayers, the naysayers, the blue waivers, all of these people. They're all telling you, oh no, the Democrat Party is going to run away with it. They're going to run away with the midterms. And historically speaking, they would probably be right. But I have a feeling that this midterm is shaping up to not be as cut and dried as what historical values have demonstrated. One of the major reasons is because of all of the redistricting that's been going on and the fights that have been going on with the redistricting. For an example, Texas being required by the courts to redistrict. They were required by the courts to redistrict because they threw out the new maps that were being created. And so Texas said, okay, fine, we'll just redistrict again. And when they did, they added, I think it was something like 4 or 5 seats to the potential Republicans. And then California, of course, says, well, we don't give a crap about our Constitution, which states that we can only redistrict in years that the census is taken. We don't care about that. We're going to go ahead and throw it to the voters, and the voters are going to make the choice. And by the way, we statutorily handed over the redistricting to an independent third-party committee. And we're going to pull that back. And we're going to make them no longer available. So, yeah. Anyway, that's still in court. Then you have, obviously, the governor, Gavin Newsom, hair gel himself, was saying, yeah, we're doing this because of what Texas did, even though Texas really didn't do anything other than follow the court. But then you have Virginia. And Virginia goes and says, hey, we're going to redistrict. We're going to take our relatively evenly split state, 6 districts to 5 districts, 6 Democrats to 5 Republicans. And we're going to go ahead and redistrict because we don't think that Virginians actually vote that way, even though historically speaking they do. And they went ahead and changed it or put it to the voters and said, hey, voters, allow us to suspend our typical statutorial requirement of using an independent committee and allow us to go ahead and change the redistrict map the way we think it should be for quote unquote fairness. Yeah. A 10-to-1 ratio is not fair. 6-to-5 is fair. And the way that the state actually votes. But 10-to-1 is not. So they go ahead and they have this referendum on the ballot, and then it comes to find out that the Virginia legislature, they went ahead and did it without paying attention to specific rules in their constitution that state, hey, any of this stuff has to fall within these specific parameters. And, well, the Democrats kind of ignored about 3 or 4 of them. So then what ended up happening? Well, it went to the Supreme Court of Virginia. The Supreme Court of Virginia asked hard questions on Monday and was basically demonstrating by some of their lines of questions and how they were treating the 2 different lawyers the potential idea that, well, maybe they're not quite on board with this whole redistricting idea and how it was done. Well, we just received another indication that, yeah, the Virginia Supreme Court likely is not going to be on the side of the Democrats. They are likely going to be on the side of the Republicans and say, yeah, you guys kind of skipped a few steps. This in Blaze Media Says Virginia Democrats get bad news about legally dubious gerrymandering effort. So the question was asked, and by the way, this guy in the photo here, this is, I think his name is John Jay. He's the attorney general for Virginia and has basically been like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to fight this all the way till the end. So apparently he went to the Supreme Court, the Virginia Supreme Court, and said, we are petitioning the court to allow us to go ahead and certify the votes that happen, the redistricting votes. Now, here's the thing. Most of the time, whenever you have a court, the court kind of sits and decides whether or not A, there is a case, B, whether or not one side is more than likely to win over the other. And whenever these kinds of injunctions or requests for injunctive relief come in, which is essentially what this is, they usually will indicate what the court is thinking by which way they go with a request for injunctive relief. In this particular case, the state was saying, hey, can we, while this thing kind of goes on, can we just go ahead and certify the vote? We just want to certify the vote. That's it. Now, the local guy, the local federal court judge, he's the one that originally blocked it. So the Virginia Supreme Court was basically asked, hey, can you sort of like override that guy's order and allow us to go ahead and certify it? Because regardless of how this comes out, I mean, we'd like to, continue the process and certify the ballots so that we can be prepared when the decision comes down to be able to move. Well, the Virginia Supreme Court, they said no. We are refusing to allow the vote results to be certified. Now, for those of you who don't quite understand court speak, that's an indication that the Virginia Supreme Court does not think that it's going to rule in favor of the state and the Democrats in this case. If we didn't have any sort of an indication previously by the questions that were being asked and how the lawyers were being treated, this just adds a level to the side where I believe it's going to go. I think the Virginia Supreme Court is basically going to say, yeah, you guys skipped. You guys skipped some part of the processes. And you're done. So, yeah. Anyway. Oh, sorry. It's Jay Jones, not John Jay, but Jay Jones. He filed the motion for the emergency stay of the Hurley order, which basically stated that, no, you cannot certify this election result. So, yeah. Yep. So there's a good possibility right now that the Virginia Supreme Court might say, yeah, you guys overstepped your boundaries and will throw out the redistricting. Which obviously they should. They should. Now, all of that being said, the Supreme Court decided to step in today with the result of that Louisiana versus Calais case. I'll kind of bring you up to speed on this real quick. The case is regarding... Yeah, no stay, Jake, go away. The case is regarding a Louisiana redistricting that happened where Louisiana was forced, because of race-based redistricting requirements, required the creation of what is considered to be a second black majority congressional district within the state of Louisiana. And it was a lower court ordered creation. So the lower courts took a look at the redistricting map that Louisiana was first presenting, which only had one black majority congressional district. And the lower court basically said, well, no, you need to make a second district because it is supposedly going to comply with the anti-discrimination provisions of the 1965 Federal Voting Rights Act. Now, keep in mind, this is due to the fact that there were still racial discrimination, Jim Crow laws, so on and so forth, that were prevalent, especially in the South, that were taking away the black person's right to vote and causing undue hurdles to try and get the black community to vote or to have the ability to vote in the elections. So the original U.S. District Judge, Shelley Dick, from the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Louisiana, ruled that an earlier version of the state's electoral map, which included only one black majority congressional district, discriminated against black voters, who constitute almost a third of the state's population. So the judge basically found that Louisiana's failure to add a second black majority congressional district likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 2 prohibits voting practices or procedures that discriminate based on race, color, or membership in a large language minority group such as American Indians, Asian Americans, Alaskan Natives, or American Hispanics. Now, courts have consistently held, generally speaking, that the Voting Rights Act in certain circumstances allows states to take race into account when drawing electoral boundaries. But the electoral maps drawn explicitly based on race are unconstitutional. Now, that statute has been interpreted by the courts to forbid racial gerrymandering when it dilutes minority voting power. Now, in the Louisiana case, there was a group of non-black voters who basically sued and said, hey, the map with the two black majority districts discriminated against non-minorities by engaging in explicit racial segregation of voters. Now, today, in a 6-3 decision, with the majority opinion being written by none other than Justice Alito, where Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Brown-Jackson dissented, Alito writes, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was designed to enforce the Constitution, not collide with it. Unfortunately, lower courts have sometimes applied this court's Section 2 precedents in a way that forces states to engage in the very race-based discrimination that the Constitution forbids. He said compliance with Section 2 can, quote, provide a compelling reason for race-based districting, but the section does not impose liability at odds with the Constitution. And it should not have imposed liability on Louisiana for its 2022 map. Complying with the section, quote, could not justify the state's use of race-based redistricting here. And even though the state made understandable efforts to comply with the district judge's ruling, the redrawn map with a second black majority congressional district was nonetheless an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. So, consideration of race? Yeah. Well, this is actually going to seriously trigger the left. The reason being is because, according to them, now keep in mind, this is the reason why this is so important, okay? People of color traditionally have voted Democrat. So whenever you have a district or a reason, a race-based reason to create a district, that district is almost automatically always going to be Democrat. And so the Democrats have been using race-based redistricting tactics for decades. When in reality, what should be happening is forget what the person votes, how the person votes, or how the people vote. Forget whether it's a Republican district or a Democrat district. The only thing that should matter is we're going to create a district, and it's going to be made up of X number of people. That's it. We have, and it should be a straightforward mathematical calculation. We have, let's say, just to make numbers easy, 100,000 people, and we have 10 districts available, because for every 10,000 people, we get a district. That should be it. That should be all and everything moving forward across the entire United States. That should be it. And if the voters within that district, those 10,000 people, all get together and vote Democrat, or the vast majority vote Democrat, then it becomes a Democrat district. If the vast majority vote Republican, then it becomes a Republican district. If the vast majority end up in a situation where it's more of a purple district, which I have a feeling is where most of this is going to go, especially in places where cities and rural areas are kind of combined as a part of the district, you're going to end up seeing a lot of states that are typically full blue. Yeah, they're going to be more purple. We're not going to have this whole idea of a red state, blue state across the board. There will still be red states and blue states, don't get me wrong, but what you'll end up seeing is the districts that are rural in nature will generally lean conservative, i.e. Republican, and the urban and some suburban districts will generally lean to the Democrats. But keep in mind, this is going to start a flurry of states that are going to sit there and go, you know what? You know what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to redistrict. Because now we no longer have to consider race as a part of our redistricting process. We no longer have to make a district, quote unquote, fair, okay, across the board for a specific race. We just need to, well, create a district. And again, I simply say the only criteria should be population. That's it. Well, Florida has decided to go ahead and redistrict. Now, they were going to redistrict anyway. They were going to try. But they were going to redistrict anyway. And, well, yeah. Well, what I can tell you is the Florida House of Representatives has decided to advance the state's new congressional map. They passed it. Not unanimously, but they passed it by a majority of 83 to 28. And that was today. This nationwide redistricting battle is going to continue, and it's going to become even more convoluted and probably even worse, because the proposal now will move to the state Senate in Florida, where Republicans who hold a 2/3 majority are widely expected to approve the new maps as well. Now, the map, of course, was initially proposed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. It is reportedly going to give the state 4 additional Republican-leaning seats. And if it's enacted, the Florida will actually be represented by 24 Republicans and just 4 Democrats in Congress. Now, for those of you that aren't keeping count here, there are 435 seats in the House of the House of Representatives. Right now, we have maybe a 1 or 2 seat majority. So if you count Texas and you discard California, because let's say that one hopefully will get overturned by the state Supreme Court in terms of the Constitution, the constitutionality of it. You discount Virginia's BS. That means that the Republicans will be, at this point, gaining whatever Texas had, which I think was like 4 seats. Florida will have 4 seats. And, yeah, you'll end up with a little bit more of a possibility of a buffer in the House of Representatives for the Republicans. Now, here is, let's see. Yeah. So anyway, so there's that. And that, of course, comes as no surprise. I mean, Ron DeSantis sort of alluded to it last week and so on and so forth. So we'll just have to sort of see what's going to happen here. But if Virginia gets tossed, which it should, and California gets tossed, which it should, that would mean that the Dems have a bit of a problem when it comes to the redistricting race. Because most of these states, like Illinois, New York, California, they already had redistricted and gerrymandered their states to be, well, pretty well locked up for the Democrats anyway. In fact, there's even a couple of states up in the Northeast that literally have 0 representation for the Republican voter base, even though up to a third to almost a half in a couple of those states, at least one of them votes Republican. So that, which is, and I hate to say this, no, I don't. It literally means that you are being taxed without representation. If you live in a district or a state that has literally 0 of your party's representation, both at the state level and at the federal level, you are literally in a situation where you are being taxed without any representation. But one of the areas of the country that potentially this decision could kick off a firestorm. I already told you last night, Missouri has already said, hey, we're going to go ahead and redistrict. We're going to go ahead and redistrict anyway once this comes down, if it goes the way that we think. And they're not the only ones. Because, take a look at this. With the SCOTUS Voting Rights Act ruling, Georgia State Senator Dozal calls on Governor Kemp to call for a special redistricting session. Here we go. Remember what I told you about in terms of the South, how the South could potentially change the leaning? There are some estimates that are saying that we could be picking up, we as in the conservative Republicans, or just the Republicans, that we could be picking up to 12 seats out of just the southeast part of the state if they decide to redistrict. So this guy is the first to call on Governor Kemp to hold a special session to redraw Georgia's congressional maps in the wake of the decision on the Voting Rights Act. And this is literally what the redistricting is going to be, because many states like Georgia and I'm sure, Alabama, Tennessee, obviously Florida is already redistricting, so on and so forth. Okay, that they're already at the point where they're just like, you know what? If we don't have to use race as a requirement in our redistricting, let's just redistrict. because now we no longer are required to use race, and so therefore we don't have to have majority black districts or whatever. So, yeah. Now, the Supreme Court, just to be clear, did not overturn Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The only thing that they did was they basically said that the Louisiana state map with a majority black district was unconstitutional. So how this gets interpreted and moves forward is going to be of a certain question in terms of how it's going to be carried on forward and how it's going to be implemented. But Dozal is quoted as saying, all right, y'all, the Supreme Court just told us what we already know to be true. Racially gerrymandered maps are unconstitutional. So it's time for Georgia and the other southern states to remove these maps that we drew that were unconstitutional. Because, you know, if we look in the Northeast and we see what Democrats have done, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, they've completely removed every single Republican congressional seat ever. The last thing that Republicans need to do is be weak-kneed in this moment. This is a time to be bold. This is a time to be aggressive. And in Georgia, that means calling a special session and redrawing our maps. So, yeah. By the way, this same guy is a candidate for lieutenant governor as well. So, we're going to have to see what's happening. Now, he's the first one to call for the special session, but don't get me wrong, it's going to be probably a week or so for all of this to sort of kind of figure things out in terms of what is going to happen here. But, yeah. Now, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was recently quoted as saying that redistricting meant maximum warfare and that Democrats were going to fight to redistrict maps in their favor. Seriously? Maximum warfare? Yeah. Anyway. So now Governor Kemp in the state of Georgia. Now keep in mind, okay, remember Texas, I've seen a lot of people on social media, they've been saying, oh, Texas did it without having their voters. Well, the Texas state constitution does not require the voters for redistricting. That's part of Texas state law. They don't need it. And so everything that Texas did is constitutional according to the Constitution of the state of Texas and is completely correct in terms of all of their statutes and laws. Virginia is running into their constitution because they didn't follow it. So if Governor Kemp doesn't call the special session in Georgia, it requires 3/5 of the state legislature to basically say, hey, we're going to do this. So we're going to have to see what's going to happen. And I don't even know if Georgia is going to be the only one that's going to do this. So, yeah, we'll just have to see. All right. Well, the Supreme Court wasn't done. So they put out that ruling on the redistricting, but the Supreme Court also issued a win for the Republicans or the conservatives across the country. So this particular case, and this is in New Jersey, or the case is in New Jersey. So there's a corporation, it's a conservative corporation called First Choice Women's Resource Centers. And they provide pregnancy crisis services. They're pro-life, okay? And they provide pregnancy crisis services that do not include abortion. Well, the New Jersey Attorney General's office came to them and said, we need to see 10 years worth of your fundraising records. And the First Choice Women's Resource Center says, well, what you're asking for is a violation of our First Amendment rights. The Supreme Court sided on the side of the First Choice Women's Resource Centers, because keep in mind, had the resource centers handed over all of these documents that the New Jersey Attorney General's office asked for, it would have exposed private information from donors such as you. It would have exposed all of their private information. It would have made them open to, who knows, whatever. So the decision, by the way, was written by Justice Gorsuch. And Gorsuch wrote in the ruling, basically said that the First Choice Women's Resource Centers will go back to the lower court to argue their point against the investigation. They essentially established a present injury to its First Amendment associational rights sufficient to confer Article III standing. Basically means that they can actually argue the case in court. They have a case. And he wrote also that First Choice has established that an injury, in fact, arises when a defendant burdens a plaintiff's constitutional rights. And the defendant in this case, of course, is the New Jersey Attorney General. Now, the government demands for a charity's private donor information has just that effect, meaning that they're going to get injured. Such demands inevitably discourage association with groups engaged in protected First Amendment advocacy and encourage groups to cease or modify protected advocacy the government disfavors. So, yeah. So the Attorney General's office had first served a subpoena on First Choice that commanded the group produce 28 categories of documents, including documents that reflected the names, phone numbers, addresses, and place of employment of all the individuals who had made donations by any means other than through one specific web page. Effectively, he says, that demand required First Choice provide personal information about donors who gave through two other websites, through the group's various social media pages, by mail, in person, or by any other means. Because the subpoena warned twice that failure to comply may render the group liable for contempt of court or other penalties. See, New Jersey's interest, reportedly in this, was finding out if there was a discrepancy between what First Choice told donors and what they told patients. Now, pregnancy crisis centers, of course, have come under fire from pro-abortion groups because they are specifically centers for expectant mothers that do not provide pregnancy termination. So they are basically likely targeted because they don't like doing abortions. So anyway, so this was a win for the pregnancy center. Speaking of abortions, and I'm not going to play this video only because it describes in detail some things, but I got to tell you, Representative Brandon Gill, he is a guy to watch. He is really a guy to watch. And the reason that I point this out is because he was in some sort of a committee, congressional hearing over the protests which are held outside of abortion clinics. Now, he yesterday went viral on this video because he ended up grilling an abortion activist with regards to the activist's favorite type of abortion. Now, what's funny about these abortion activists, and again, most of the time when you ask them or you try and pin them down on something, they fold, they cave. In this particular case, when you think about it, if you're going to advocate for something, for an example, if you're going to advocate for, say, the death penalty, you would have some reasons as to why you are advocating for the death penalty. You would be able to potentially answer questions like, well, if you're for the death penalty, which do you think is more humane? Electrocution or firing squad or hanging? You might have in some way a perception of which one might be, or even lethal injection, which one might be, more preferable in your eyes. Okay. Well, unfortunately, this individual, this Gill, went after one of the people that were testifying, and he basically was saying, "Hey, you're advocating for abortion. Which abortion do you like?" And the woman was caught off guard by this, obviously, but she was like, "Well, I don't really have a preference." And he's like, "So do you like the one that does this?" And he described what the thing was. And this is the reason why I'm not showing you the video. Well, then the next thing he was like, "Okay, well, do you like this version of an abortion?" And he described the gruesomeness, the gruesome act of the abortion. Or he says, "Do you like this kind of abortion?" And he described that particular part of the abortion. And the thing that's so striking about this is the fact that, first of all, this woman, of course, was like, "Well, I'm only here to talk about what the committee is here to talk about." And Gill goes, "Well, we're here to talk about abortion. So let's talk about abortion. Which one of those three is your favorite?" But here's the thing. If you have the stomach to listen to it, to listen to the video, and you have the wherewithal to go find it, I just have one single simple question. Where within those three procedures that Brendan Gill describes in terms of what happens to the human life inside the woman's womb, what happens to that human life? And why is it that you, as an abortion advocate, can sit there and say that that baby deserves that treatment? This is the thing. This is the thing. She, of course, wouldn't answer the question. And this is part of the problem. When you go and you look at them, I mean, literally, if you walk up to a abortion advocate and you ask them, in my mind, you ask them a couple of questions. First question: do you believe that human life should be protected? For an example, do you believe that murder should be a crime? The second question: if you were to see somebody on the street killing an animal, whatever kind of animal it is, dog, cat, whatever, for no reason whatsoever, just they see, this animal on the street and they decide to kill it, which, by the way, is a potential precursor to serial killers. But I digress. Would you say that that was wrong? Would you say that it was wrong for that individual, whoever that is, to kill an innocent life? out of a matter of convenience. I mean, what do you do, for an example, when you run across somebody who maybe throws away a bag of puppies on the side on the side of the road? You get mad? Now, if they answer yes, but they say, "Oh no, not all human life should be protected," but they answer yes to the fact that a dog or a cat or whatever, a puppy, a kitten or something, is a problem, well, then you have to ask the question, well, then why is that not okay, but yet doing the horrific acts by choice 99% of the time, by choice, that it is okay to murder an innocent human being? See, this is part of my problem with the left, because the left has decided that if you do not fall within a certain ideological thought process, you automatically are no longer worth anything, which is why they keep going after people like President Trump, which is why they continue to condone the actions of the violent, because to them it's okay. It's okay if you get your butt beat on the sidewalk and killed during a riot. That's fine, because your death will further the cause, whatever that is. This is ridiculous, people. We as society have lost, in some cases, our humanity. And because we have lost our humanity, this is why things like the political violence that you're seeing in the streets, that the excusing of criminal behavior is being allowed. That, oh, just because you are a member of a certain class, you automatically fall within a victimology classification, and therefore you cannot be responsible for any of your actions. George Floyd. He died because of a self-induced overdose. But no, he didn't die because of self-induced overdose. He died because somebody sat on his chest, which he actually didn't. But see, this is the point. This is the point of the left. To dehumanize. To take away the values that Americans have been ingrained with, for the most part, throughout our entire history. Our Declaration of Independence talks about unalienable rights, that the right to life, the right to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is all part of not what the government gives, but what our Creator gives. And these people have forgotten it. Alrighty, folks. Sorry, I don't have a pet of the week queued up. I know, Coco says that I have one, but I neglected to find it or see it. So my apologies on that. But anyway. Well, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once you are signed up and signed in, make sure you search up the American Perspective channel and hit that green follow button to get notified every time I go live. Also, too, don't forget on your way out to hit those thumbs up, thumbs downs, or in the case of 3 Chevy, thumbs sideways or at an angle across all my platforms, whether it's X, YouTube, Facebook, or, of course, the aforementioned Rumble. We will see you tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.